It all started on a Saturday morning. The kind where everything feels peaceful, and the only sound is birds chirping while you sip your coffee. I had just stepped into my driveway, mug in hand, admiring the shine on my Mustang. It wasn't brand new, but I'd put time and care into it, polished it last night, cleaned the leather, even replaced the rims last month. To me, it wasn't just a car. It was years of hard work, memories, and pride. That's when I heard it. A voice, sharp and full of attitude, cut through the quiet. "That's a nice car. My son wants it." At first, I thought I'd misheard. I turned around slowly, expecting maybe a joke or some light conversation. But no. There stood the HA president, the woman everyone in the neighborhood not so secretly called Karen, arms crossed, looking at me like I owed her something. And next to her, her teenage son, about 17, chewing gum with that smug look teenagers get when they think the world belongs to them. He pointed at my Mustang like he was pointing at a snack in a vending machine. "Yeah, I want it. I told Mom you'd give it to me." I blinked. For a few seconds, I didn't say anything. I thought maybe this was some weird prank, maybe one of those hidden camera shows. But she wasn't laughing. Neither was he. She took a step closer, now standing at the edge of my driveway, and said, "He turns 18 next month. He's been working hard. You've had that car for years. I'm sure you can afford a new one." Now, let me be clear. I'm not the kind of person who loses my temper quickly. But I'm also not the kind of guy who just gives his car away to some spoiled kid because a nosy HOA president thinks she can talk people out of their property. I said calmly, "That's not going to happen." Karen looked at me like I'd just insulted her family. "Excuse me? This is a community where we share and help each other. My son deserves that car. And you're just being selfish." I took a slow breath and repeated, "No. I bought this with my own money. It's not for sale. It's definitely not up for giving away." That's when the mood shifted. Her son, clearly used to getting his way, threw a little tantrum, kicked the tire, said something under his breath I won't repeat. And she reached for her phone. "Fine. If you're going to be difficult, I'll just call the police. This is harassment. You're creating a hostile environment for the youth of this neighborhood." She was calling the cops on me. For saying no. For refusing to hand over my car to her kid. You'd think I'd be worried. You'd think maybe this is where someone might panic. But not me. I watched her walk to the sidewalk and dial. Her voice turned sweet. "Hi. Yes, I'd like to report an aggressive neighbor. He's refusing to cooperate with HOA policies and he's causing distress to my son." I leaned against the Mustang, arms folded, just waiting. While she was on the call, her son kept glaring at me like he was planning to key my car when I wasn't looking. He muttered, "You don't even look like you belong here." That part? That got under my skin a bit. Not because I was offended, but because I've heard that tone before. From punks who think they're above the rules. From kids who have never been told no. And from people who don't realize they're talking to the one person in town they really shouldn't cross. Karen finished the call with a smug little smile. "They're sending someone now. Maybe you'll start being more cooperative when the officers show up." I looked down at my watch. I already knew exactly who was on duty that morning. I already knew what was about to happen. I just smiled and waited. Not a word. Not a warning. This wasn't just another day with an entitled neighbor. This was about to become one of those stories that gets whispered behind fences, gossiped about in coffee shops, and replayed in group chats with laughter. Karen had no idea what she'd just done. And her son? Let's just say he was about to learn a very valuable life lesson, one that wasn't going to come with a free Mustang. About 10 minutes passed before the first patrol car rolled slowly around the corner. Karen stood up straighter when she saw it, like a queen awaiting her guards. Her son puffed out his chest, hands on his hips, acting like justice had finally arrived to deliver him a new car. I didn't move. I was still leaned against my Mustang, sipping the now slightly cold coffee. The officer in the cruiser parked by the curb, stepped out, and began walking toward us. Karen waved both hands in the air. "Officer, over here." She rushed up to him before he could say anything, her voice already in high gear. "This man has been extremely rude. He's aggressive. He threatened my son. He's refusing to follow community standards. And he's creating a very dangerous situation for the young people of this neighborhood. The officer gave her a nod and kept his face professionally neutral. He glanced over at me for a second, then back to her. "Ma'am, do you mean that man over there by the Mustang?" She crossed her arms. That's him. He's been a problem since day one. His car is a distraction. It's way too flashy. My son's been talking about it nonstop, and now the man refuses to hand it over even though I offered a very reasonable arrangement. The officer raised his eyebrows slightly. "You offered to buy the car?" "Well, not exactly buy. More like, help the community. My son deserves it. He's a good boy. He's got good grades." From where I stood, I could hear every word. But I still didn't speak. Not yet. The officer gave her a patient look and said, "Okay, ma'am. I understand. Let me speak with the gentleman now." Karen gave him a proud smile and stepped aside like she had just won something. The officer walked over to me, calm as ever. "Morning, Chief." I gave him a nod. "Morning. Everything good?" He held back a grin. "Everything's fine here. Just a bit of confusion, apparently." I pushed off the car and stood up straight. "Yeah, seems like it." Behind him, Karen froze. She didn't hear what he called me. But her son did. His face twitched like he was trying to process it. His mouth opened a little, but no words came out. Karen called out again. "Did you tell him he's harassing us? That my son has rights too." The officer didn't look at her. He stayed focused on me, like we were having a regular check-in. "You want me to take it from here, or?" I shook my head. "No, I'll handle it." I took a few steps toward Karen and her son. Her face twisted with confusion. She still didn't get it. Her son, though, he was starting to get very quiet. I stood a few feet from them and finally spoke. "Ma'am, let's clear something up. First, this is my car. It's not for sale, not for donation, and not something I'm handing over to your son. Second, you made a false report to the police, accusing me of aggression. That's a serious issue. But I'm going to give you a pass, this time." Karen opened her mouth, ready to fire back, but I raised my hand lightly. "I'm the chief of police for this district." She blinked. Then blinked again. Her voice came out small. "What?" Her son slowly stepped backward like he was trying to disappear into the ground. I nodded. "That's right. You just called my officers to report me for not giving away my personal vehicle. Now, I could take this a lot of ways. I could file a complaint against you. I could open a case for making a false report. I could even escalate this through city channels. But I won't, because I believe people like you teach themselves bigger lessons than the law ever could." Karen looked pale. She glanced at the officer behind me, then back at me, trying to figure out if this was real. The confidence was gone. The smug smile vanished. All that remained was silence. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just stood there, stunned. Her son muttered, "I didn't know, man. I didn't know you were..." I looked at him. "That's the problem. You didn't care who I was. You just thought you could take something that didn't belong to you." The officer stepped beside me and added, "You might want to think twice before calling 911 over a car next time." Karen turned and walked away without another word. Her son followed, dragging his feet. I watched them disappear down the sidewalk, my Mustang gleaming under the morning sun behind me. After they walked off, you'd think that would have been the end of it. Most people would be embarrassed enough to let it go. But this wasn't just any neighbor. This was Karen. And Karen wasn't used to losing. She certainly wasn't used to someone turning her down, especially not someone she thought she could push around. So while her son stayed quiet for a while, she didn't. Not even close. Later that week, I started noticing small things. First, a letter from the HOA in my mailbox. It claimed that my car violated community standards because it was too loud and attracting unnecessary attention. That made me laugh. My Mustang has a stock exhaust, quiet as can be. It's not a racing car. It's a classic cruiser. But apparently, its very presence now disrupted the harmony of the street. I shook my head and tossed the letter in the drawer. That didn't stop the next one. Or the one after that. Soon enough, I was being reminded about trash can placement, how long my lawn was, and even the color temperature of my porch light. Yes, they actually complained it was too warm compared to the HOA's preferred cool white. At that point, it was obvious, this wasn't about community rules. This was personal. Karen was using the HOA like her own little weapon. Petty violations, fake concerns, made-up policies, they started stacking up, all targeted at me. She wanted to get back at me in the only way she thought she could, by trying to bury me in rules. But what she didn't realize was, I knew the HOA charter better than she did. I'd read the bylaws. I knew which policies were enforceable and which ones were just suggestions written by power-hungry board members. So I started responding. Officially. Every letter I received, I answered. With legal language, clause references, and politely firm rebuttals. I copied the real HOA board on everything. And since I had access to the city records, I attached every official zoning, traffic, and nuisance code relevant to each claim. They wanted a battle? I gave them one, with documentation. One morning, I got a knock on the door. This time, it wasn't Karen. It was Dan, another member of the HOA board. He looked tired, worn out, like someone who'd been stuck between a rock and a Karen for way too long. Mind if I talk to you for a second? He asked. Sure, I said. Come on in. We sat at my kitchen table. He let out a long sigh and ran his hand through his hair. Look, man, he started, this whole thing with the car and the letters, it's gotten out of hand. Karen's been stirring things up. She's been pressuring the board to go after you. I leaned back, waiting. But here's the thing, he continued, the rest of us, we don't want any part of this. It's personal. It's petty. And we know it. You haven't broken any rules. And honestly, half the neighborhood thinks she's lost it. I nodded slowly. So what are you saying? I'm saying we're backing off. Officially. The board's not going to entertain any more letters unless there's a real issue. We're tired of being dragged into this. That was good to hear. I appreciated his honesty. But I also knew people like Karen don't just stop. They don't admit they're wrong. They regroup, they gossip, they plan the next move. Sure enough, that weekend I saw her at the neighborhood park. She was talking to two other women, waving her hands around dramatically. I could tell she was telling her version of the Mustang story, where she was the victim and I was the big bad neighbor with the fancy car and the attitude. As I walked past, I heard her say, and he even told the cop he was the chief. Like, who just makes that up? I stopped, turned slightly and said, that cop? He works for me. You're welcome to call and check. Again. Her face flushed instantly. She didn't say a word. Just turned her back and muttered something I couldn't quite catch. That's the thing about people who live off control. They start to panic when they realize it doesn't work on everyone. Karen had tried to take my car. She tried to weaponize the HOA. She tried to control the narrative. But every time, she hit a wall she didn't expect. And I hadn't even pushed back. Not yet. A few days later, things took another turn. I came home from work to find a notice stuck to my door. It wasn't the usual typed-up letter in an envelope like before. This one was bold, red inked, taped directly onto the glass, and clearly meant to be seen by neighbors walking by. At the top, in all caps, it read, Notice of Non-Compliance. It claimed that my Mustang was an unauthorized display vehicle and not suitable for prolonged visibility in a family-oriented neighborhood. I stood there reading it, wondering if I should laugh or be impressed. I mean, it takes real effort to invent a violation that ridiculous. There's no such thing in the HOA guidelines. None. I checked again just to be sure. Still, it was clear Karen had gone full throttle now. She wanted to embarrass me. So I took the notice down calmly. But I didn't throw it away. I scanned it, saved a copy, and started building a small folder. Not for revenge. Not yet. But just in case things got worse, I wanted a record. Dates, times, language, and tone. Karen wasn't playing by the rules, and I had no doubt she was hoping I'd snap first. But what Karen didn't know was that I had time, patience, and a desk drawer full of legal training. She was playing checkers. I was already setting up the chessboard. The next morning, I decided to pay a visit to the HOA board in person. I dressed in plain clothes, no uniform, no badge, just jeans and a tucked-in shirt. I didn't want to come in hot. I wanted a conversation, not a confrontation. When I arrived at the small office they used for meetings, Dan, the same board member who visited me before, greeted me with a tired nod. "She left that notice on your door, didn't she?" he asked before I even sat down. I raised an eyebrow. "So you knew?" "She bragged about it in the meeting yesterday. Said you were lowering property values with muscle cars and intimidation." I chuckled. Intimidation? I've said maybe 6 words to her since she called the cops. Dan sighed. "Look, the rest of us are fed up. We know she's abusing the process. But she keeps threatening to file complaints with the city. She emails us 5 times a day. We've tried ignoring her, but it's getting to be too much." I could see it on his face. He was done. But he also didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. "I don't want to turn this into a legal mess," I told him. "But I will if I have to. She's harassing me. She's using HOA resources to do it. And if it continues, I'll file a report, not just as a resident, but as the police chief." Dan sat back in his chair, thinking. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You know, the HOA president role isn't permanent." I paused. "Go on." He nodded. "Elections are in 2 months. Karen's running unopposed. No one else wants the drama. But if someone were to step up, get support from the neighborhood, she wouldn't stand a chance. People are tired of her." The idea hadn't crossed my mind before. I never thought of myself as the Richard type. I wasn't about block parties and flowerbed rules. But maybe that was exactly why I should run. Because it wasn't about power, it was about balance. About making sure people like Karen didn't run the place like their own kingdom. I told Dan I'd think about it. I thanked him and left. That afternoon, I walked the neighborhood. Not to campaign. Just to talk. I stopped by the park, chatted with a few folks on their porches, waved to parents walking kids back from the bus stop. And the more I listened, the more I realized something important. I wasn't the only one Karen had rubbed the wrong way. One neighbor told me she once fined them for leaving a garden hose out for over 30 minutes. Another said Karen tried to block their backyard swing set because it wasn't in the spirit of community decor. It was all starting to make sense. She didn't just dislike me, she disliked anything she couldn't control. That night, I sat on my back porch, coffee in hand again, Mustang gleaming under the porch light. The air was warm, quiet, almost peaceful. But something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It wasn't even about one bad neighbor. It was about drawing a line and deciding that enough was enough. Not with yelling, not with threats, but with calm, steady pressure, and maybe a clipboard full of signatures when election day rolled around. A week passed without a single letter, no surprise visits from Karen, and no new fake violations. It was almost eerie, like the calm before a storm. I wasn't naive enough to think she'd given up. Karen didn't retreat, she recalculated. And sure enough, the silence broke on a Thursday morning when I saw her standing by the community bulletin board with a stack of papers and a roll of tape. She was putting up flyers. I walked a little slower as I approached, pretending to check my mailbox. Her eyes flicked over at me, but she said nothing. Just kept taping. I waited for her to leave, then walked up to the board. The flyer had bold letters across the top. "Do you know who's running your HOA?" Below it was a long rant, poorly formatted and full of half-truths. She accused me of using my authority to bully neighbors, bringing unrest into our peaceful streets, and, my personal favorite, plotting to turn the HOA into a personal police state. There was even a grainy photo of me walking to my car, taken from what looked like a few houses down. Creepy stuff. I pulled one of the flyers down and folded it neatly. Then I walked door to door. Not to defend myself. Not to argue. Just to talk. The first neighbor I visited, an older woman named Mrs. Harding, opened the door with a smile. "I saw the flyer," she said before I even spoke. "And?" I asked. She shook her head. "Ridiculous. I've lived here 18 years. You're the first neighbor who's actually stopped by to say hello without asking for something." We talked for 15 minutes. She told me stories about Karen trying to make her repaint her mailbox because the paint was too glossy. I thanked her, left her with my number, and moved on to the next house. That day, I spoke to over a dozen neighbors. And by the time I was done, I wasn't discouraged, I was encouraged. Nearly everyone I spoke to had a Karen story. Not one of them supported her. Most were tired. A few were scared. But more than anything, they were ready for change. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I filled out the HOA candidacy paperwork and submitted it officially. Dan gave me a slow clap when I turned it in. "This might be the most exciting election we've ever had," he joked. Karen, of course, found out almost immediately. The next day, she cornered me near the community mailbox. Her voice was low, tense. "You're making a mistake." I stayed calm. "I'm following the rules." Her mouth tightened. "You think this is about rules? You're trying to embarrass me." "No," I replied. "You've done that part on your own." She stared at me for a second, trying to come up with something clever. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away. From that moment on, the energy in the neighborhood shifted. I started getting quiet thumbs-ups from people I barely knew. One dad handed me a cold soda while mowing his lawn and said, "About time someone stood up to her." A teen from a few blocks over handed me a petition. He and a few friends had gone around gathering support on their own. I hadn't asked. They just did it. It wasn't some big campaign. No lawn signs, no debates, no social media drama. Just neighbors talking to neighbors. And the more we talked, the more stories came out. Like how Karen once reported a family for noise pollution because their toddler was playing with a toy xylophone. Or how she tried to find someone for having a garden gnome she claimed violated decor harmony. People were done being controlled by fear of made-up rules and HOA intimidation. And somehow, my Mustang had become a symbol. Not of rebellion, but of someone who wasn't afraid to say no. And then, on a quiet Sunday morning, something unexpected happened. Karen's son, the same one who had once tried to claim my car like it was a prize, showed up at my doorstep. Alone. No smugness. No attitude. "I just wanted to say," he started, staring down at the ground, "that whole thing with the car, it was dumb. I get it now." I waited. My mom doesn't like being challenged. But she was wrong. I was wrong. It caught me off guard. But I nodded. "Takes guts to admit that." He shrugged. "You're not what she says you are." I smiled. "Neither are you. Not if you keep growing like this." He nodded, turned around, and walked off. And right then, I knew the neighborhood was already changing, even if the vote hadn't happened yet. Election day came faster than anyone expected. The HU didn't exactly have long, drawn-out campaigns. Just a vote box in the community center, a short meeting, and a few folks from the board acting as volunteers. No debates. No speeches. Just ballots and whispers. I got there a few minutes early. The place wasn't crowded, but the people who did show up looked different this time. More alert. More interested. Usually these meetings were sleepy. Half the chairs stayed empty. But today, most of them were full. People I'd only nodded to in passing were there, shaking hands and talking in low voices. Dan was near the table with the ballots, quietly organizing the forms and nodding as each neighbor checked in. Karen walked in 15 minutes late, just loud enough to make a statement. She had a clipboard in one hand and her son trailing behind her, clearly forced to be there. She didn't even look at me. Just made a beeline for the voting table and handed in her form with a smug little smile. I stayed quiet. I didn't make a scene. I didn't try to campaign in the room. I simply walked over, signed my name, dropped my vote into the box, and sat down with a bottle of water. The rest was up to the neighborhood. While the votes were being counted, there was small talk, the kind that buzzes just beneath the surface of something bigger. People looked over at me, then at Karen. They weren't hiding it. One guy leaned over and whispered, "You know, if she loses, she might just explode." We waited about 25 minutes. Then Dan stood up, cleared his throat, and held up a sheet of paper. "All right, folks. The results are in." Karen stood straight, arms crossed, like she was preparing to win an award. I didn't move. Dan looked down at the paper, then up at the group. With 82% of the vote, the new HOA president is, he paused, probably for effect, or maybe just to make Karen sweat. Chief Marcus Bennett. I don't even remember standing up. People clapped. A few gave small cheers. One woman actually stood and gave me a thumbs up. Karen? She looked like someone had just unplugged her from the wall. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her son stepped away from her slowly, like even he wasn't on her side anymore. Dan shook my hand. Congratulations. I just nodded and smiled. Karen didn't say a word. She grabbed her clipboard and stormed out. No speech. No farewell. Just the sound of her heels hitting the floor, getting quieter with every step. After the meeting ended, a few neighbors came over to talk. One told me, she fined me for having a seasonal wreath once. Said it was too orange. Another said, she called code enforcement on my dogs barking while we were on vacation. Everyone had a Karen story. Now I had the responsibility and a folder full of them. That night, I walked my street for the first time as HOA president. Not to flex. Just to observe. The same Mustang was parked right where it always had been. No one glared at it. No one whispered. And no fake violations had appeared taped to the windshield. I stopped at the little bulletin board at the edge of the neighborhood. The same place where Karen once posted her smear campaign. I looked at it now, clean, empty. I pulled out a piece of paper and tacked it up. New HOA contact, Marcus Bennett. My door is open, my phone is on, and my rules are fair. Let's make this place one we're proud to call home. Simple. No power plays. On my way back, I passed Karen's house. Lights off, blinds pulled. Her car was in the driveway, but no sign of her. No more shouting at teens riding skateboards, no more calling the city for unauthorized lawn chairs. A few houses down, Mrs. Harding waved from her porch. You did it, she said with a grin. I laughed. We all did. She lifted her tea glass. To quiet streets and no more crazy letters. It felt different now. Lighter. Like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath and finally let it out. And I knew this wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about standing up when no one else wanted to. About saying, that's enough, when someone crosses the line. But deep down, I also knew something else. Karen wasn't done. Not entirely. People like her don't disappear. They wait. They look for cracks. And when they find one, they come right back through it. I'd won the vote. I'd gained the trust. But I also knew, sooner or later, she'd be back, clipboard in hand, ready for round 2. It didn't take long. Less than 2 weeks after the election, a letter arrived. Not from the HOA this time, but from a private law office with an address downtown. Plain envelope. No return name, just a slick logo stamped across the corner. I opened it slowly, already guessing what it might be. And I was right. Inside was a cease and desist letter. It accused me of defamation, abuse of power, and creating a hostile living environment for one of the HOA's long-standing residents, Karen. It claimed that I had weaponized my role in law enforcement to silence a civilian, and that my recent election had been tainted by coercion and fear tactics. I read the whole thing twice, then set it down and chuckled. Karen had hired a lawyer. Not a great one, judging by the sloppy formatting and the complete lack of real evidence. But still, this wasn't just HOA drama anymore. She was escalating it into something bigger. Or at least, trying to. I called Dan. He answered on the second ring. Let me guess, I said. You didn't get a letter too, did you? Nope, he replied. But I heard she's been calling board members individually, trying to convince them to call for a special vote to remove you. Of course she is. Dan sighed. She's losing control. This is how people like her fight when they've got nothing left. But still, you good? I'm good, I said. I've got a friend at the county courthouse. I'll run this letter by him. But there's nothing in here that holds water. But that wasn't the part that worried me. The part that stuck with me was this. Karen was digging in her heels. She'd lost the vote, lost the board, lost her public power, but she wasn't letting go. And she wasn't doing it out of principle. It wasn't about neighborhood values. It was about control. And people who crave control don't back down. They wait. they gather allies. They whisper in corners and wait for a slip-up. So I kept my head down and went to work. As the new HA president, I started making real changes. First, I pushed through a proposal to create a formal complaint process, one that required signatures, dates, and a clear explanation before any violation could be issued. No more anonymous tattling. No more vague concerns. If someone had an issue, they had to own it. Second, I created a digital archive of HOA policies and made it public to all residents. No more guesswork. No more rumors about what was allowed or not. Everything was transparent. If your mailbox paint was too glossy, you could see for yourself if it mattered. And finally, I opened up the board meetings. Anyone could attend. Anyone could speak. We didn't just read rules and close doors. We listened. It didn't take long before things got better. People were actually showing up. Not to complain, but to talk. To share ideas. Someone suggested starting a small neighborhood garden. Another proposed a block party for the first time in years. But even as things moved forward, Karen kept her distance, watching. Waiting. One evening, I saw her walking her dog, crossing the street when she spotted me. No wave. No eye contact. Just a slow turn of her head and a quickened pace. A few neighbors noticed. One even said, "It's like she doesn't know who she is anymore now that she's not in charge." But I did. Karen hadn't disappeared. She was just reloading. Then, another letter arrived. Not legal this time, just a typed sheet slid under my door. No return address. No name. Just this line. Asterisk, you may have one, but I'm not going anywhere. It didn't rattle me. It didn't even surprise me. But it confirmed everything I'd been feeling in my gut. Karen wasn't done. So I made a quiet decision that night. If she wanted a fight, she could have one, but it would be on my terms. No drama. No yelling. No threats. Just rules, facts, and unshakable calm. I had the neighborhood's trust now, and I wasn't going to waste it. Every time she pushed, I'd push back with policy. Every time she lied, I'd answer with proof. And if she tried to play dirty, I'd stay clean and still win. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about a car. It wasn't even about Karen. It was about showing everyone else that you can stand your ground, keep your dignity, and still come out on top.